The morning light filtered through the sheer curtains, casting a soft glow in our bedroom. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of another day pressing down on me. My husband, Mark, had already left for work. His routine was predictable, almost comforting in its monotony. Yet, as I listened to the faint sounds of the neighborhood waking up, birds chirping, a lawnmower starting up, I felt an emptiness gnawing at me. I had spent years nurturing our family life, pouring my energy into our home and marriage. But lately, an unshakable sense of dissatisfaction crept into my thoughts. Mark was often preoccupied with his job, leaving little room for intimacy or connection between us. I missed the spark we once had, the late-night talks over wine, the spontaneous weekend getaways. Now, our conversations revolved around bills and household chores. With a sigh, I swung my legs over the side of the bed and padded to the kitchen. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air as I poured myself a cup. I glanced at my phone, half hoping for a message from Mark that would brighten my day. Instead, there was nothing but silence, a stark reminder of how distant we had become. As I sipped my coffee and stared out at our quiet suburban street in Portland, I contemplated what had gone wrong in our marriage. Was it simply a matter of time? Life had a way of dulling even the brightest flames if not tended to regularly. I longed for connection but felt trapped in a cycle of routine that left little room for vulnerability. The doorbell rang unexpectedly, pulling me from my thoughts. I opened it to find Jake standing there, my stepson, his face lighting up with a smile that momentarily chased away my gloom. He was 22 now, no longer the awkward teenager who first entered my life but an adult with his own dreams and aspirations. "Hey. Is your dad home?" he asked. "No," I replied softly. "He's at work." "Oh." Jake shifted his weight from one foot to another, looking slightly disappointed but not deterred. "I thought maybe we could hang out for a bit." I hesitated. This wasn't just an ordinary visit. There was something about Jake's presence that stirred emotions within me, feelings I didn't quite understand or want to acknowledge. But loneliness gnawed at me more fiercely than any reservations about crossing boundaries. "Sure," I said finally, stepping aside to let him in. We settled into the living room with cups of coffee, his black and mine with cream, and began talking about everything and nothing at once, his job search after college and my attempts to keep busy around the house while Mark worked long hours. As we chatted casually about mundane topics, the weather and upcoming local events, an undercurrent of tension simmered just beneath the surface. Jake's laughter filled the space between us. It was infectious and reminded me how much I craved joy in my life. At one point during our conversation, he reached across to grab a cookie from the plate on the table beside me. His hand brushed against mine, a fleeting touch that sent an unexpected jolt through me. It was innocent enough, yet it lingered like an electric current sparking warmth where there had only been coldness before. "I'm sorry," he said quickly as he pulled back his hand, flushing slightly. "It's okay," I replied too quickly, feeling flustered by both his proximity and my reaction to it. Our eyes met briefly before we both looked away awkwardly, an unspoken acknowledgement hanging between us like a fragile thread threatening to snap under pressure. As Jake continued sharing stories about friends from college and plans for summer adventures, I found myself captivated by him in ways that felt wrong yet exhilarating all at once. He spoke passionately about his interests, the art scene in Portland and local coffee shops buzzing with creativity, and each word resonated deeply within me. Time slipped away unnoticed until suddenly it dawned on me how late it had become. Reality intruded upon our moment together like an unwelcome guest crashing a party. My heart raced as guilt washed over me. This wasn't right, not when Mark would be home soon. "I should probably get going," Jake said reluctantly after glancing at his watch. "Yeah, you're right," I replied quietly. We both stood up simultaneously. An awkward silence enveloped us as we moved toward the door together. There was something unspoken lingering in the air, a tension neither of us could name but both felt intensely. "Thanks for hanging out," he said softly as he stepped outside onto the porch. "Any time," I managed to say back before closing the door behind him with shaking hands. Once inside again, solitude clung tightly around me like heavy fog rolling in off the coast, a stark contrast to moments earlier when laughter echoed through these walls like music filling an empty room with life again. I sank onto the couch and buried my face in my hands as confusion swirled within me like leaves caught up in autumn winds outside. What was happening? Why did spending time with Jake make me feel alive again? It wasn't just loneliness, it was something deeper stirring beneath layers of guilt and desire that threatened everything familiar around us all too easily if left unchecked. And just when clarity seemed within reach, a sudden sound interrupted my thoughts. Keys jangled outside, followed by footsteps approaching our front door, Mark returning home earlier than expected from work without any warning whatsoever. My heart raced anew as panic set in. Would he sense anything amiss? Would he notice how different things felt between us now? Just then came another knock, followed by Mark's familiar voice calling out cheerfully from behind closed doors, "Honey, I'm home." In that moment, suspended between two worlds, the mundane reality of married life colliding head-on with uncharted territory, I froze completely, unsure how everything would unfold next. The door creaked open, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. Mark stepped inside, his presence filling the room with a casual warmth that felt both comforting and suffocating. I forced a smile, trying to mask the whirlwind of emotions swirling within me. "Hey, you're back early," I said, my voice steady despite the tension that hung thick in the air. "Yeah, I thought I'd surprise you," he replied, his eyes scanning the room as if searching for something out of place. "What have you been up to?" "Just cleaning," I answered, glancing at the cluttered table where remnants of our earlier conversation still lingered. The air felt heavy with unspoken words, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Mark sensed a shift in our dynamic. "Looks like you've been busy," he remarked, his tone light yet probing. "Anything on your mind?" I hesitated, caught between the urge to confide in him and the instinct to protect what fragile peace we had left. "Just thinking about some things," I managed to say, forcing my gaze away from him. As he moved closer, I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. It was an innocent proximity, yet it ignited a spark deep within me, one that had been smoldering for far too long. Just then, Mark's phone buzzed on the table, breaking the momentary silence. "Excuse me," he said, reaching for it. As he turned slightly away from me to check his messages, I took a deep breath, trying to regain some semblance of composure. But my thoughts drifted back to earlier that day, how easily laughter had turned into something more profound with my stepson. I remembered how we had shared secrets over coffee just days before, how one accidental touch during our conversation had sent shivers down my spine. The memory lingered like an echo in my mind, reminding me of how vulnerable I felt around him. "Everything okay?" Mark asked when he noticed my distant expression. I forced a laugh that sounded hollow even to my own ears. "Yeah. Just lost in thought." He raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Instead, he moved closer again and placed his hand gently on my shoulder, a gesture meant to comfort but which only heightened my awareness of him. My heart raced as memories flooded back, moments shared with his son that felt both innocent and charged with an unspoken connection. "I should probably get dinner started," I said abruptly, stepping away from his touch as if it were a live wire. "Sure. What do you feel like?" Mark replied cheerfully as he headed toward the kitchen. As he busied himself with finding ingredients in the fridge, I stood frozen for a moment longer before following him into the kitchen. The clatter of pots and pans filled the space between us, a familiar sound that usually brought comfort but now only deepened my sense of disconnection. "Do we have any chicken left?" he asked casually while rummaging through shelves. I nodded absently but couldn't focus on anything other than what lay beneath our daily routines, the tension simmering just below the surface like water ready to boil over. After a few minutes of small talk about work and weekend plans, we fell into an uneasy silence again. Moments stretched out like elastic bands ready to snap, every second felt laden with possibilities and consequences. Then came another knock at the door, this time more insistent than before. My heart raced again. Could it be Lucas? No one else would come by unannounced at this hour. "I'll get it," I called out hurriedly before Mark could react. As I opened the door slightly ajar and peered outside, relief washed over me. It was indeed Lucas standing there with an eager smile on his face. "Hey. Hope I'm not interrupting anything," he said brightly as if unaware of how much those words twisted inside me at that moment. "No. Not at all," I replied too quickly while motioning for him to come inside. Mark glanced up from chopping vegetables and offered Lucas a nod. "Just making dinner." Lucas stepped into our home like a breath of fresh air, somehow lighter than either of us could manage to be at that moment. "Smells good. Need any help?" "Nope. Just relaxing here," Mark replied playfully while tossing some herbs into a bowl with practiced ease. As they chatted about trivial things, sports scores and weekend plans, I found myself drifting again into thoughts about how easily Lucas fit into this family space despite everything changing between us recently. It wasn't long before their banter turned into playful teasing. Lucas jokingly challenged Mark over who made better pasta sauce while I busied myself setting up plates on the dining table, my mind racing ahead toward what lay beneath this facade of normalcy we tried so hard to maintain. And then it happened, a moment so fleeting yet profound that time seemed to stand still between us all. Lucas reached across the table for something just as I leaned forward too, our hands brushing together accidentally, and suddenly everything shifted again. In that split second when skin met skin, the world around us faded away entirely, all noise dulled except for our heartbeats echoing against each other's rhythm. A silent acknowledgement passing between us filled with longing wrapped tightly in layers of guilt and confusion. I pulled back instinctively but not before catching Lucas's gaze, a look filled with unspoken understanding mirrored back at me, one filled with questions neither of us dared articulate aloud amidst family ties binding us together yet threatening everything we were becoming apart from each other. "What was that?" Mark asked casually without looking up from his task, completely oblivious yet somehow sensing something had shifted within our dynamic once more, as if cracks began forming beneath surfaces worn thin by years spent avoiding deeper truths lurking just beneath them all along. I swallowed hard against rising emotions threatening to spill out uncontrollably now, every ounce of guilt clawing its way back up through layers built thick around fragile hearts yearning for connection beyond mere familial bonds alone. We kissed, slipped out before reason could stop it, a confession hanging heavily in mid-air, the weight settling between three souls intertwined by blood yet divided by desires forbidden. A silence descended upon us like fog rolling in off-distant shores, each heartbeat echoed loudly against walls closing tighter around secrets held far too long. The air between us crackled with unspoken words, the moment stretching like a taut string ready to snap. I could see the confusion in his eyes, mirroring my own turbulent thoughts. How had we crossed this line? What had once been innocent banter now felt like a precarious tightrope walk, and I was terrified of falling. We stood there, inches apart, the weight of our shared secret heavy in the space around us. The street fair outside pulsed with life, laughter spilling in through the open window, yet here we were, suspended in a world of our own making. My heart raced as I replayed our kiss in my mind, an impulsive act that felt both exhilarating and dangerous. "I shouldn't have done that," I whispered, barely above a breath. My voice trembled with uncertainty. "Neither should I," he replied, his tone laced with regret but also a hint of something else, something that made my stomach flutter. I turned away from him, feeling the warmth of shame creeping up my neck. The street fair was supposed to be a distraction, a way to escape the confines of my mundane life at home. Instead, it had become a backdrop for this unexpected connection. The vibrant colors and joyous sounds felt like an affront to the turmoil brewing inside me. As we walked through the fair together, I tried to focus on the lively atmosphere around us, a local band playing upbeat tunes, vendors hawking handmade crafts and artisanal foods. But every glance exchanged between us ignited memories of our kiss, sending ripples of guilt through my mind. "Do you want some cotton candy?" he asked suddenly, breaking the silence that had settled uncomfortably between us. I nodded slowly, not trusting myself to speak further. He bought 2 fluffy pink cones and handed one to me with a shy smile that made my heart flutter again. It was strange how something so simple could feel so loaded with meaning now. As we wandered past booths filled with trinkets and local art, I caught sight of a close friend from my book club across the way. Her eyes narrowed as she watched us interact. I felt exposed under her scrutiny. She approached us with an easy smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hey there." Enjoying the fair, she asked casually, but her gaze lingered on our entwined fingers as if trying to decipher an unsaid story. "Yeah," I replied too quickly, pulling my hand away as if burned by fire. Her expression shifted slightly, a flicker of concern crossing her features before she masked it with lightheartedness. "Just be careful out here. You know how these things can get." I nodded again, forcing a smile while internally cringing at her veiled warning. Did she sense something? Or was it simply her protective instinct kicking in? Either way, it only added another layer of anxiety to an already complicated situation. After she left us standing awkwardly amidst festival-goers lost in their own revelries, I turned back to him, feeling vulnerable under his gaze. "We need to talk about what happened," I said quietly. He nodded solemnly but didn't say anything further. Instead, he looked down at his feet as if searching for answers buried in the pavement beneath him. The rest of our time at the fair passed in a blur, my mind racing as we shared small talk and cotton candy while avoiding any mention of our kiss or what it meant for us moving forward. Yet every innocent touch felt electric, each laugh resonated deeper than before. Later that evening when we returned home, a familiar sanctuary now tinged with uncertainty, I found myself reflecting on how much had shifted between us within just hours. The house felt larger somehow, spaces echoed with memories tainted by new emotions surfacing beneath layers long buried. As night fell softly outside our windows and shadows danced across walls illuminated only by dim light fixtures overhead, I found myself drawn into another conversation with him on the couch where we often watched movies together as family. Only tonight felt different, charged somehow, as if everything hung precariously on an edge waiting for someone brave enough to push forward into unknown territory. "What do you think this means?" he finally asked after several moments steeped in silence, the question hanging heavy like fog settling over Portland's streets at dawn. "I don't know," I admitted honestly while glancing away from him toward walls adorned with family photos capturing moments frozen in time. Smiles wide and carefree yet now feeling distant amidst growing complexities unraveling before me like threads pulled from fabric worn too thin over years spent navigating roles defined by duty rather than desire. "We shouldn't have crossed that line," he said softly but resolutely, his voice steady despite evident turmoil behind those words, and yet something about his tone stirred feelings deep within me. A yearning for connection long neglected overshadowed by obligations demanding attention elsewhere. "I know," I replied quietly, but part of me wondered what would happen if we didn't stop ourselves from exploring this newfound bond further still. In that moment, the air thickening around us, I realized how desperately lonely I'd been for so long, craving intimacy beyond what routine offered day after day until now when unexpected desires ignited sparks illuminating shadows lurking just out of reach before them. Our lips met again suddenly, an impulsive decision fueled by emotions swirling unchecked, but this time carried weight beyond mere curiosity. It felt like surrendering fully into depths previously unexplored while acknowledging risks involved without hesitation or regret lingering behind closed doors left ajar inviting possibilities anew. And then just as quickly as it began, a sound shattered our moment. Footsteps echoing through hallways leading toward living room where husband's presence loomed larger than life itself, unexpectedly returning home early from work without warning. Time froze momentarily, the reality crashing down around me. What would happen next? The air thickened with tension as I turned, my heart racing. The sound of footsteps grew louder, and I could almost feel the weight of my husband's presence before he even appeared in the doorway. My mind raced through a myriad of thoughts. What would he say? What would happen to us? Lauren? His voice echoed through the hallway, a mix of confusion and concern. I instinctively stepped back from Ethan, my stepson, who stood frozen beside me. The warmth of our shared moment dissipated into the air like steam from a cup of coffee left too long on the counter. I glanced at Ethan. His eyes were wide, mirroring my own panic. Hey. I called out, trying to sound casual while my heart threatened to burst from my chest. You're home early. I had a meeting cancel, he replied, stepping into the room. His gaze flicked between me and Ethan, suspicion creeping into his expression like an unwelcome guest. Ethan cleared his throat awkwardly. Just helping Lauren with some home improvement stuff. Right, my husband said slowly, crossing his arms over his chest as if trying to shield himself from whatever was unspoken in the room. What kind of home improvement? The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. My mind raced for a plausible excuse that wouldn't lead to more questions or reveal too much about our recent connection. We were just talking about some paint colors for the living room, I said finally, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. Paint colors, he repeated slowly, skepticism lacing his tone. Sounds productive. A silence stretched between us like an unbridgeable chasm filled with unacknowledged feelings and hidden truths. My husband's brow furrowed as he studied us both closely. I could see him searching for answers in our expressions. Why don't you two take a break? I'll get dinner started, he suggested after what felt like an eternity. Sure, Ethan replied quickly, backing away slightly as if trying to distance himself from the situation. As my husband moved toward the kitchen, I felt a rush of relief mixed with dread wash over me. This wasn't over, it couldn't be that simple. I turned to Ethan, who was still standing there uncertainly. What do we do now? He asked quietly. I don't know, I admitted, feeling lost in this labyrinth we had created together. We need to talk. That evening passed in a blur of awkward glances and forced conversation over dinner. My husband chatted about work while I picked at my food, each bite feeling heavier than the last. Ethan sat across from me, stealing glances when he thought no one was looking, each glance igniting an internal struggle within me. After dinner, as my husband retreated to watch television in the living room, Ethan found me alone in the kitchen while I washed dishes. Can we talk? His voice was low but steady. I nodded and led him outside onto the back porch where we could speak privately under the fading light of dusk. The cool air wrapped around us like a shroud as we settled onto the steps. I'm sorry about earlier, he began hesitantly. I didn't expect him home so soon. It's not your fault, I replied softly, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me again, the guilt mingling with something else entirely different that made it hard to breathe. He shifted closer, our knees brushed against each other's, a small but electric contact that sent shivers down my spine despite everything that had happened earlier in the day. I can't stop thinking about you, he confessed suddenly, his eyes searching mine for understanding or perhaps forgiveness for what we had begun together. My breath caught in my throat at his words. How could something so wrong feel so right? But guilt tightened its grip around my heart like a vice. We can't keep doing this, I said firmly yet quietly. It felt like breaking an unspoken promise between us even though it was true. This wasn't sustainable or fair to anyone involved. I know. His voice was barely above a whisper now, as if saying it louder would make it all too real. But being with you feels different. Different, it was such an understated word for what surged between us, desire wrapped tightly around longing and fear coiling deep within every moment we shared together. "What do you want?" I asked suddenly. It felt imperative that we lay everything bare before moving forward or stepping back entirely. His gaze dropped momentarily before meeting mine again with renewed determination shining through those youthful features, so full of hope yet marred by uncertainty at this crossroads where we stood together. "I want you." The words hung heavily between us, a declaration laden with implications neither of us could fully comprehend yet both desperately craved nonetheless. Before I could respond or even think clearly enough to process what those words meant for either of us moving forward, he leaned closer again until our lips met softly, a tender connection that ignited every nerve ending within me while simultaneously sending alarm bells ringing throughout my mind screaming caution. Just then, a sudden noise shattered our fragile moment, footsteps echoing behind us on gravel leading toward where our husbands lingered just out of sight nearby, the reality crashing down around me once more. "We should go inside," I whispered urgently, pulling away abruptly as panic surged through every fiber of my being. I didn't want anyone else witnessing this chaos unraveling before their very eyes. Ethan nodded reluctantly but didn't move immediately, his expression conflicted between desire still lingering upon those lips freshly kissed moments ago versus reason urging him back towards safety away from danger lurking close by. As we stepped inside together again, the warmth enveloping us contrasted sharply against cold reality waiting just beyond those walls. I knew nothing would ever be quite right again after tonight. In those quiet hours following dinner spent isolated within our family home filled with memories now tainted by secrets, we spent time together talking about everything under stars shining brightly overhead until sleep finally claimed me. When morning came, I awoke next to him, my heart racing anew at realization. We spent the night together. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting soft shadows across the room. I turned to my side, and there he was, asleep beside me. His face was relaxed, free from the worries that seemed to consume my own mind. In that moment, I felt a surge of warmth mixed with a rush of guilt. What had we done? As I carefully slipped out of bed, trying not to disturb him, the weight of our actions pressed heavily on my chest. I moved quietly through the house, each creak of the floorboards echoing my inner turmoil. The kitchen welcomed me with the familiar scent of coffee brewing, a comfort that felt almost foreign now. My husband's voice called from downstairs, breaking the silence. "Lauren." "I made breakfast." The cheerfulness in his tone struck me like a jolt. How could he be so oblivious? "Coming," I called back, forcing a smile onto my face as I stepped into the sunlight streaming through the window. The contrast between my husband's bright demeanor and my own conflicted feelings was stark. Breakfast was a simple affair, scrambled eggs and toast, but today it felt like a performance rather than a meal shared between partners. I watched him as he laughed at something on his phone, his eyes crinkling with joy. A pang of longing hit me. This was the man who had once made me feel cherished. "Are you okay?" he asked suddenly, looking up from his screen. "You seem distant." "I'm fine," I replied too quickly. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. He nodded but didn't seem convinced. "We should do something today, maybe head out to that new cafe on Hawthorne? They say it's great." "Sure," I said, forcing enthusiasm into my voice while internally cringing at the thought of being in public with him while my heart belonged elsewhere. After breakfast, we got ready for our outing. As I applied makeup in front of the mirror, thoughts of last night flooded back, his touch, our whispered confessions in the dark, and it felt like betrayal to even consider putting on a happy face for my husband. "Ready," he called from downstairs. I took a deep breath and descended to join him. He looked at me with that familiar warmth as we stepped outside into the crisp Portland air. The streets were alive with people heading to their weekend plans. Families strolled by with laughter echoing around us. As we walked toward the cafe, Memories of sharing similar moments with him filled my mind, lazy Sunday mornings and spontaneous road trips before life became monotonous and predictable. But now those memories were tainted by what had transpired between me and his son. The cafe buzzed with energy as we entered. It was adorned with local art and filled with chatter that should have been comforting but only heightened my anxiety. We found a small table near the window where sunlight poured in like an embrace I desperately needed but didn't deserve. I ordered us some pastries, he said cheerfully as he placed our coffees down on the table. Thanks, I replied softly, trying to focus on his words instead of drifting into thoughts about what might be happening right now at home. What if he woke up alone? What if he wondered where I was? So, he began after taking a sip of coffee, how about we plan a trip soon? Just you and me? My heart raced at the suggestion. It felt like an invitation to escape reality further rather than confront it head-on. That sounds nice. My voice wavered slightly as guilt washed over me again. Just then, an unexpected figure walked into the cafe, the very person who occupied too many corners of my mind lately, my stepson. He spotted us almost immediately and waved awkwardly before approaching our table. Hey. Didn't expect to see you here, he said casually but couldn't hide his surprise. Just grabbing some coffee, my husband replied cheerfully while I struggled to maintain composure. What about you? My stepson's gaze flickered between us. There was an unspoken tension hanging in the air that only deepened when he sat down without waiting for an invitation. I was just passing by, he said nonchalantly, but there was an edge to his voice that told another story entirely, one filled with secrets only we shared. We exchanged small talk while trying not to let any hint of our connection slip through, an impossible task as every glance lingered just too long and every smile held too much meaning beneath its surface. Have you guys tried their blueberry scones? He leaned forward slightly. There was something almost conspiratorial in his tone, as if this moment meant more than just casual conversation over coffee. No, my husband answered brightly without sensing anything unusual about our interaction while I struggled not to betray myself through sheer panic coursing through me at what this could mean for all three of us if anyone noticed anything amiss. I'll get one for us all then. He stood up abruptly before either of us could respond and headed toward the counter. I watched him go, feeling an overwhelming mix of emotions wash over me. Fear mingled with longing for what we had shared last night under stars now hidden behind clouds threatening rain outside this cozy cafe window where everything felt so ordinary yet so deeply complicated beneath its surface facade. What do you think? My husband broke into my thoughts again as he sipped his coffee, contentedly unaware how precarious everything truly was right now, between family ties fraying dangerously close to unraveling completely under pressure none could see yet felt deeply within each heartbeat, echoing loudly around us all here together, pretending everything remained unchanged despite everything having shifted irrevocably overnight. I think. My words faltered momentarily before finding their way out cautiously into open air surrounding us both. I think things are changing. In that instant, a fleeting moment suspended in time, I saw understanding flicker across his face, followed by confusion mingled tightly together, leaving no room left untouched by uncertainty pressing down heavily upon us all. Before either could respond further, the bell above door chimed again, announcing another arrival, bringing fresh faces along with new possibilities threatening old comforts. And just like that, we were reminded how quickly everything could change once more. The air in the cafe felt heavy with unspoken thoughts, a stark contrast to the cheerful buzz of laughter and clinking cups around us. I sat across from my stepson, his eyes searching mine for answers that I was reluctant to provide. The weight of my choices pressed down on me like a thick fog, clouding my judgment and obscuring the path ahead. Are we really going to pretend that night didn't happen? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The question hung in the air, palpable and charged with tension. I could see the flicker of hope in his gaze, but also a hint of fear of what our connection might mean. I don't know, I replied honestly, pushing my coffee cup away as if it were a distraction from our reality. Everything feels so complicated right now. My heart raced as I thought of my husband and the impending job transfer he had mentioned casually during dinner last week. A new position in another city could change everything for us, a chance to start over or an escape from the mess I had created. He leaned back in his chair, frustration etching lines across his forehead. You can't just ignore it. We have to talk about what's next. The urgency in his tone made me uneasy. It was as though he believed we could navigate this tangled web together without acknowledging the potential fallout. Maybe we shouldn't meet alone again, I suggested, trying to keep my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. It's not fair to either of us. The words felt like a betrayal, yet they were necessary for self-preservation. His expression shifted from frustration to disappointment, and I felt a pang of guilt twist in my stomach. So that's it? We just pretend everything's normal? I shook my head slowly, feeling trapped between two worlds, one where I could explore this unexpected connection and another where family loyalty demanded silence. I don't want to hurt anyone, I said softly. Just then, the cafe door swung open again, letting in a gust of cool air that sent shivers down my spine. A familiar figure stepped inside, my husband, looking for all the world like he belonged there. My heart sank as he scanned the room before locking eyes with me. What are you doing here? He asked, surprise coloring his voice as he approached our table. Caught off guard, I struggled to find words that wouldn't reveal too much. Just grabbing coffee, I managed to say while inwardly cursing fate for its cruel timing. He nodded slowly but didn't leave. Instead, he pulled up a chair beside me without invitation. My stepson shot me a glance filled with uncertainty before turning his attention back to his drink. The tension at our table thickened palpably as we all sat there, three lives intertwined by circumstance but divided by secrets. Did you have plans today? My husband's question was innocent enough on the surface but carried an undercurrent of suspicion that made my skin crawl. No plans, I replied too quickly, glancing at my stepson who remained silent beside me. What would happen if he spoke? Would he reveal more than either of us intended? My husband shifted slightly in his seat as if sensing something off-kilter about our dynamic. I thought we could go for a walk later, he suggested lightly. The idea felt suffocating. How could I face him after everything? But before I could respond, my stepson interjected with unexpected boldness. Actually, Mom and I were just discussing some things about family. His voice held an edge that surprised me. It was both protective and defiant. My heart raced at his choice of words, the way they hung between us like an unspoken agreement that threatened to unravel everything if not handled delicately. Family? My husband raised an eyebrow at him before looking back at me for confirmation. Yes, I stammered out finally, desperate to steer away from any implications that might arise from this conversation. Just some things we need to work through. My husband nodded slowly but remained unconvinced. There was an intensity in his gaze that made it clear he sensed something deeper beneath our surface-level chatter. As we sat there together in an awkward silence punctuated only by distant laughter from other tables around us, an internal battle raged within me, between wanting to protect my family and longing for something more fulfilling than what had become routine. Then came the moment when everything shifted again. My stepson leaned closer toward me and whispered just loud enough for only me to hear, "Let's meet tonight." His suggestion sent shockwaves through my mind. Part of me wanted desperately to agree while another part screamed for restraint. How could we risk everything again? Yet there was also an undeniable thrill at the prospect, a chance to confront our feelings head-on rather than let them fester beneath layers of denial. Before I could respond or even articulate how dangerous this path was becoming, my husband stood abruptly from his chair with determination etched into every line of his face. "I'll be waiting outside," he said tersely before walking away without another word or glance back toward us, a clear signal that something had shifted irrevocably within him too. As soon as he left the cafe behind him, the air turned electric with anticipation mixed with dread. Every heartbeat echoed louder than before, as though time itself had slowed down around us while leaving no room for hesitation anymore. "What do you want?" my stepson asked quietly after several moments passed between us, filled only by tension swirling thickly around us both like fog enveloping Portland streets outside. I looked into those eyes, searching mine again, the same ones who had become both solace and source of conflict, wondering if this would be our last chance or merely another step down this precarious road together. The air in the house felt charged, as if the very walls were holding their breath. I stood there, caught in the moment, my heart racing as I searched for words that wouldn't come. The question lingered between us like an uninvited guest, and I could see the uncertainty in his eyes mirrored my own. "I don't know what I want," I finally admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. It was true, I was lost in a maze of emotions, each turn leading me deeper into confusion. The weight of my choices pressed down on me, suffocating yet intoxicating. He shifted slightly, his gaze unwavering. "You're not alone in this," he said softly. There was a sincerity in his tone that made my chest tighten. How had we arrived here? This place where vulnerability danced dangerously close to desire? Dinner had been tense, my husband's laughter a distant echo while we sat around the table. He'd been animated, sharing stories from work that felt so far removed from my reality. I had watched him with an ache in my heart, wishing for a connection that seemed to have slipped through our fingers like sand. After dinner, when we were alone again, the silence became unbearable. That's when I found the letter tucked away on his desk while searching for some paperwork. My husband's neat handwriting filled the page with words that struck a chord deep within me. "I'm struggling too," it read. "I miss us and worry about what's happening between us." My breath caught as I continued reading. He spoke of feeling disconnected and overwhelmed by work pressures, how he longed for intimacy but didn't know how to bridge the gap that had formed between us. In that moment, guilt washed over me like cold water. Here was my husband laying bare his own vulnerabilities while I was entangled in something I couldn't fully understand or control. My stepson's presence loomed large in my thoughts. He had become both a refuge and a source of turmoil. "Why didn't you tell me?" The words slipped out before I could stop them as I confronted him later that evening after he returned home from work. "I didn't want to burden you," he replied, his expression pained but resolute. "Burden me? You're my husband. We're supposed to share everything." My voice rose slightly with frustration. He looked away, his expression shifting from hurt to defensiveness. "And what about you? You've been distant too." I opened my mouth to respond but faltered as realization settled over me like a heavy blanket. Hadn't I been retreating into myself? Seeking solace elsewhere when all along he was reaching out? The argument spiraled into familiar territory, unspoken resentments bubbling to the surface like lava threatening to erupt from a dormant volcano. Each word felt like a dagger aimed at our already fragile bond. "Maybe we need time apart," he suggested finally, and those words struck me harder than any fight we'd ever had before. Time apart? The notion sent shockwaves through me. Is that really what you want? It might be what we need. His voice was steady but filled with an undercurrent of uncertainty. The idea hung between us like an uninvited specter. It felt both terrifying and liberating at once. My mind raced back to moments shared with my stepson, the laughter and connection we found together amidst all this chaos. "Maybe you're right," I replied slowly, trying to grasp at some semblance of clarity amid the storm brewing inside me. As night fell over Portland and shadows crept into our home, sleep eluded me. My thoughts were consumed by memories of stolen glances and whispered secrets shared over coffee at our favorite cafe on Hawthorne Boulevard. How could something so innocent have turned into such tangled emotions? I stared at the ceiling while listening to the sound of rain pattering against the window, a soothing rhythm yet filled with an urgency that mirrored my own heartache. Would stepping back really help us find our way back to each other? Or would it only push us further apart? The next day passed slowly. Each tick of the clock felt amplified, as if time itself was mocking me for not having made decisions sooner. My phone buzzed with messages from friends checking in on how things were going at home, a lifeline thrown amidst turbulent waters, but they only served as reminders of how isolated I truly felt. Then came another unexpected twist when my stepson suggested meeting again under less complicated circumstances. Just coffee at our usual spot without any pretense or guilt hanging over us like storm clouds threatening rain. I hesitated momentarily before agreeing. Part of me craved that connection again while another part warned against deepening this precarious bond further still. As we sat across from each other later that week, his eyes bright with anticipation, I couldn't shake off feelings of trepidation mixed with excitement coursing through my veins like electricity sparking life into dormant dreams long forgotten. "Do you think this is wrong?" he asked suddenly after sipping his drink thoughtfully. "What do you mean?" I replied cautiously, unsure where this conversation would lead us next. "I mean, what we have." He gestured vaguely between us as if trying to capture something intangible floating just out of reach. I paused before answering. Every word weighed heavily on both our hearts now intertwined by choices made in shadows rather than light, a secret world hidden beneath layers of familial obligation and desire unspoken until now. "I don't know," I confessed, finally feeling raw honesty bubble up within me. A mixture of fear and hope clashing together inside my chest like waves crashing against rocky shores, desperate for release yet terrified of drowning beneath their weight all at once. Just then, without warning, the doors swung open behind us, unexpectedly revealing someone who would change everything once more. My husband stood there wide-eyed, taking in the scene before him, the two of us together sharing laughter over coffee, unaware of how fragile this moment truly was. And suddenly everything changed again, the future hanging delicately poised on the edge of uncertainty, waiting for its next move as truths lay exposed beneath unforgiving light, illuminating paths yet unknown. The air in the room thickened with tension as my husband's eyes darted between us, absorbing the implications of the scene before him. My heart raced, caught in a whirlwind of confusion and guilt. I was still holding my stepson's gaze, our laughter hanging in the air like a fragile thread waiting to snap. "Lauren?" My husband's voice trembled slightly, betraying his disbelief. "What's going on here?" I opened my mouth to speak but found the words stuck somewhere deep inside me. The truth felt too raw, too exposed to articulate in that moment. My stepson shifted uncomfortably beside me, his expression mirroring my own turmoil. We were having coffee," I stammered, attempting to regain some semblance of control over the situation. "Just catching up." The excuse felt weak even as it left my lips. "Catching up?" His voice rose an octave, disbelief morphing into anger. "Is that what you call this? I come home early and find you two like this?" I glanced at my stepson again. He looked like a deer caught in headlights. A part of me wanted to reach out and reassure him that everything would be all right, but I knew that wasn't true. Everything had unraveled before us, and there was no going back. "Dad, it's not what you think," he interjected quickly, trying to defuse the situation. "We were just talking." "Talking?" My husband scoffed, his frustration palpable. "You think I'm blind? You think I don't know what's been happening? The tension in this house? The way you've been looking at each other?" My stomach twisted at his words. They struck a chord deep within me. Each accusation felt like a blow aimed directly at my heart. He had sensed something all along but had chosen to ignore it until now. "I'm sorry," I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "Didn't mean for what to happen?" He crossed his arms tightly over his chest, eyes narrowing as he stared me down. "To betray me? To drag him into this mess?" The silence that followed was deafening, filled with unspoken emotions and unresolved conflicts that had lingered long before this moment. I didn't plan for any of this, I admitted more forcefully than intended, feeling something shift inside me, a surge of defiance against the weight of my guilt. Then what did you plan? He shot back, stepping closer as if trying to intimidate me into submission. I took a deep breath and faced him fully for the first time since he entered the room. I planned to feel something again, anything other than this suffocating silence between us. His expression faltered for just a moment before hardening again. So you thought it was okay to find that feeling with him? My son? The word son hung heavily between us. It transformed what had been an emotional affair into something much darker, a betrayal on multiple levels. He's not just your son, I said quietly but firmly. He's also someone who understands me when you don't. My husband shook his head in disbelief as if trying to clear away the fog enveloping our reality. And what about our marriage? What about your vows? Those vows echoed painfully in my mind. They had once held meaning but now felt like chains binding me to a life devoid of passion or connection. I don't know anymore, I admitted honestly, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes but refusing to let them fall. Great answer, he replied bitterly before turning toward his son again. And you? Do you have anything to say for yourself? My stepson shifted uncomfortably under his father's scrutiny but remained silent, perhaps too aware of how powerless we both felt in this moment. We need to talk about this, he finally said after what felt like an eternity of silence. No, my husband raised a hand as if cutting off any further discussion on the matter altogether. We need to talk about why we're even here. A knot formed in my stomach at those words. They signaled an impending confrontation far beyond anything we'd faced thus far. What do you mean? I asked cautiously. You've crossed lines that shouldn't have been crossed, he said coldly while gesturing between us, the two people who once shared laughter and love now standing on opposite sides of an emotional battlefield. We can fix this, I pleaded desperately even though doubts crept into my mind like shadows threatening to consume everything we'd built together over years. Fix what? His voice dripped with sarcasm as if mocking any hope left within our relationship. You think we can just pretend none of this happened? A chill ran down my spine at his words. They struck fear into my heart, a fear that maybe we couldn't go back after all. I didn't want it to come out like this, I murmured helplessly while looking down at the floor beneath us, the ground suddenly feeling unstable beneath my feet. It doesn't matter how it came out. He snapped back fiercely before running a hand through his hair in frustration, a gesture familiar from countless arguments over trivial matters turned monumental overnight due only because one decision spiraled out of control beyond recognition. In that moment, reality crashed down around us, the weight of our choices pressing heavily against our shoulders until breath became labored under its strain while silence reigned supreme once more between us, three people standing amidst broken trust intertwined with shattered dreams held together by threads fraying, dangerously close toward snapping altogether. Then came another knock, this one louder than before, as though fate itself demanded entry into our fractured world once more.